Hello and welcome to Castles and Legends. Today we're at Rochester Castle in the historic town of Rochester. This castle has stood for over 800 years overlooking the River Medway. It is considered one of the finest examples of Norman architecture. In particular, its keep is the oldest surviving standing building of its kind in the entire of Europe, and we are going to be climbing all the way to the top today. The castle played a critical role in the Barons' Wars. The siege of 1215 by King John is one of the most renowned and most well documented episodes in English history. Rochester is a city steeped in history, dating back to Roman times, when on the east bank of the River Medway stood a Roman settlement, where Watling Street, the road between East Kent and London, crossed the river. Following the Norman conquest, an earth and timber castle was built by William the Conqueror, and it is believed that William gave the castle to his half-brother, Bishop Odo of Bayeux. Upon William's death in 1087, his lands were divided between his two sons. Robert, the elder son, inherited the title Duke of Normandy, while William II ascended to the throne as King of England. This division faced opposition from a substantial group of Norman barons who were against the separation of Normandy and England. Bishop Odo supported Robert's claim to the English throne. Odo was captured at Pevensey Castle, and William's men marched Odo back to Rochester to force its surrender. Despite this, Rochester's garrison refused and a siege ensued. Supplies to the city were cut off, which eventually forced Rochester to surrender. Odo was banished abroad and his lands were seized. In about 1087, a new stone castle began to be built in the southwest corner of Rochester's city walls, on the site that the current castle sits on, by Gundulf, Bishop of Rochester. Some parts of this castle still remain along the west curtain wall. Gundulf had overseen the construction of the iconic White Tower within the Tower of London and was a skilled architect. Rochester Castle and Rochester Cathedral were built in very, very close proximity. In fact, if we take a look behind me, we can see the cathedral just through the window. And what a beautiful cathedral that is! In 1127, King Henry I granted custody of the castle to the Archbishop of Canterbury, William de Cabet, and his successors in perpetuity, on the condition that a fortification was built within the castle walls. By 1141, the massive imposing keep's construction was complete. The keep was built using Kentish ragstone and dressed stones from Caen in Normandy. It rose to a height of 125 feet and featured 3 floors and a basement, with smaller corner towers above the wall walk. The walls were exceptionally thick to withstand stone shots, measuring 12 feet at the base and gradually narrowing to a still impressive 10 feet at the top. This thickness allowed for numerous mural chambers and galleries to be incorporated into the interior of the upper levels. The tower's structural integrity was further enhanced by a substantial internal cross wall that divided the keep from top to bottom. The Archbishops of Canterbury retained control of Rochester Castle throughout the 12th century, but during the troubled reign of King John from 1199 to 1216, Rochester found itself in the centre of the Barons' War. Over the course of several years, conflicts escalated between King John and his barons, who grew increasingly resentful of his tax hikes and disenchanted with his governance of England. John wanted to win back lands in Normandy that he had lost to the French, but after his defeat in July 1214 at the Battle of Bouvines, a battle that the barons had opposed, the barons rose against him. Tensions were subdued when John signed the Magna Carta, a charter of English liberties. John soon broke his promises, and war with the barons ensued. The rebels seized Rochester, which blocked the direct route to London. On the 13th of October 1215, John's forces arrived at Rochester and pulled down Rochester Bridge to prevent relief forces. What followed was the largest siege that England had ever experienced up to that point, lasting almost 2 months. Siege engines hurled stones continuously at the castle walls, but to little effect. So John tried another tactic: undermining. A mine was dug under the southeast corner of the keep, and John sent a letter requesting 40 of the fattest pigs, of the sort least good for eating, to bring fire to the tower. Wooden props supporting the tunnel underneath the tower were set alight using the pig's fat, and the tunnel collapsed, bringing down the tower above with it. The castle's garrison retreated behind the stone partition in the keep and held on, but conditions dramatically worsened, and to stave off starvation, they ate horse flesh. Eventually, on the 30th of November, the garrison surrendered rather than starve. John intended to execute all the garrison, but was persuaded to refrain from doing so to deter rebels, granting the same treatment to royal garrisons if the situation arose. John's war with the barons continued, but he died the following year in 1216 of dysentery. John was succeeded by his son, Henry III, who was only 9 years old at the time. On November the 12th, 1216, the Magna Carta was reissued in the name of King Henry III, albeit with the omission of certain clauses. This reissued version was sealed by the highly respected regent, William Marshal, who was entrusted with governing on behalf of the young king. Over time, Marshal successfully secured the support of a majority of the barons for King Henry III's reign. King Henry III spent vast sums of money enhancing and repairing Rochester Castle. He replaced the southeast tower, which had fallen in the siege of 1215, and is what I am standing in right now. However, rather than replace it with a square tower like the other three, he made this one circular, which we can see on the walls behind me. And he made this one circular because circular towers are more difficult to undermine. Henry's reign did not remain peaceful, as the barons became dissatisfied with his leadership, as they had his father's, ultimately sparking the Second Barons' War in 1264, under the leadership of Simon de Montfort, the Earl of Leicester. On the 17th of April, 1264, a baronial army led by Gilbert de Clare, Earl of Hertford, attacked Rochester. Simon de Montfort marched with an army from London to join the siege, but struggled to find a way to cross the River Medway. On his third attempt, with the help of a fire ship, he was successful. Smoke from the ship may have been used to disguise his movements, or to destroy the bridge whilst he moved across the water. De Montfort and de Clare now worked together in a coordinated attack with their armies. That night they breached the city and raided the cathedral, and the following day they set their sights on the castle. They breached the castle bailey and discovered the King's Hall had been burnt down by the garrison to thwart the attackers' use of it, and the defenders retreated into the keep. The following day was Easter Sunday, and a brief truce was called, but on Monday the siege resumed. For a week, siege engines bombarded the castle, causing damage, but the castle stood strong, as it had done before in the 1215 siege. And as before, the besiegers moved to undermining tactics, but with the news of a royal relief army on its way, the rebels took fright and abandoned the siege before the tunnels were completed. Again, Rochester Castle had proved itself impenetrable, but the castle had been greatly damaged during the siege and was badly in need of repair. In 1275, the castle's constables not only neglected to make any attempts to restore the structure, but also exacerbated its deterioration by pilfering stone from the castle for use in other projects. And in 1281, permission was granted to demolish the castle's hall and chambers. As the castle was no longer being used as a royal residence, it was put to use as a prison. Elizabeth de Burgh, the Queen of Scots and wife of Robert the Bruce, was captured by the English in 1306 and was imprisoned in the castle from March to June of 1314. During the reign of Richard II, Rochester Castle experienced its last conflict during the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. It came under siege and was eventually captured by a faction of rebels who ransacked the castle and released a prisoner. Earlier that same year, another disaster had struck when Rochester Bridge had collapsed. Richard II spent a considerable amount on building a new tower overlooking the bridge over the Medway. This was likely due to the threat of French invasion along the south coast during the 100 Years' War. From the 15th century through to the late 16th century, little is known about what happened and who resided at Rochester Castle. In the latter part of the 16th century, Rochester Castle had become entirely obsolete, and during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, from 1558 to 1603, she authorised the extraction of stone from the castle's curtain wall to construct a new fort at Upnor.
We have made it to the top. You need a head for heights up here, but the views are just phenomenal. So let's have a look.
During the English Civil War, the city of Rochester was captured by Royalists in 1648. However, Rochester Castle played no part in the war, indicating that by this point it was in such a ruinous state that it could not be fortified. It also managed to escape the fate of so many English castles of being slighted, that is, destroyed. This could have been because it was not considered a military risk, or that Anthony Weldon, who was in control of the castle at the time, was a parliamentarian. At an unspecified moment in history, a significant fire erupted in the castle, casting a reddish hue to the stonework. The origins of this blaze remain shrouded in mystery. By the 19th century, gardens were established within the castle's enclosure. Notably, Charles Dickens, who resided in Rochester, featured the castle ruins in his works, including the Pickwick Papers and the Mystery of Edwin Drood. It is said that Rochester Castle left such an impression on Dickens that his ghost haunts the moat on Christmas Eve. In 1872, the castle grounds were opened as a park, with the castle as a picturesque ruin. In 1965, the responsibility for Rochester Castle was transferred to the Ministry of Works, and then in 1984 to the English Heritage. Since 1995, the City of Rochester has taken on the responsibility for the day-to-day management and upkeep of the castle. The castle is open to the public to enjoy, and if you are thinking of visiting, then stay tuned to the end, where I'll add a little bit more information.
Thanks for watching today. We are actually down in the southeast for a long weekend, so we have some more pretty amazing historical sites to go visit, and I hope you're going to come and join us on those. So thank you again for watching. Do subscribe if you've not already, and I will see you on our next adventure.
The visitor information here is from our trip in October 2023. I'll add a link in the description of the website if you want to check the details. The castle grounds have a public toilet and picnic area, but there is no cafe at the castle. Unfortunately, there is no wheelchair access or lifts, and only assistance dogs are allowed in the castle keep. Admission is free for English Heritage members, and the prices for non-members are shown here. Audio guides are available to listen to as you explore the castle. There is no car park on the site, but there are lots of public car parks in Rochester city centre, just a stone throw away. If you are visiting the castle via public transport, then bus access is a short distance from the castle and the train station is half a mile away. Thanks again for watching.